Hi everyone, I hope you are all doing well. In today's lecture, we're going to be wrapping up our assessing play section and talking about evaluating play. Just a few short reminders before we get started. Exam 1 will be available for you starting on Sunday 9/24, and you will have until Sunday 10/1 at 11:59 to complete the exam. There will be no late exams accepted, so please make sure that you give yourself enough time to complete the exam in one sitting. So once you open the exam, you won't be able to come back at a later time or pause the exam. You will need to complete it within that hour time frame that is given. I'll also be posting for you a separate video going over an exam study guide with a separate Word document, so take a peek at that prior to taking the exam to ensure that you have covered all the important items that you will need during the exam. And then last but not least, you will have discussion post 3 that you'll need to complete as well on Sunday 10/1 at 11:59 p.m. Make sure that you not only complete your own post, but you comment on 2 of your peers' posts and use your text as reference. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out to me ahead of time and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And now we're going to get into our lecture for the day. Okay, so to get us started, we're going to talk about interpreting and using observations, and we're going to be looking at a lot of questions today. Most of evaluating play is thinking about the different questions that we might ask ourselves. So we've already started with getting our observations ready to go, doing our assessments, and now how do we evaluate the observations that we've done on children? And these are just some questions to get us started. So do children engage in appropriate play for their age? So we're thinking about where are children at in their development? Are they in a sensorimotory period where we notice that our young toddlers are mouthing toys, so we have an understanding of why they're mouthing toys based on their age. We could also look at the different types of play that we discussed last week, such as parallel play and cooperative play. And we also might be thinking about the areas that children are playing with and whom they are playing with. So we know that cooperative play involves 2 children playing the same thing in the same area. So we might have friends in the dramatic play area and they're picking up the phone and talking to one another, or they're setting up a scene of getting ready to have dinner. And we can see friends playing outside during tag or rough and tumble play. So are children engaging in appropriate play for their age? That's the first question that we want to ask. And then once we've determined what age children are at, where they're playing based on their development, we can say, okay, do children regularly engage in mature forms of play? So let's look back at our play checklist that we discussed last week. So we can look at where children are marked on the play checklist and what forms of play are they able to complete, and are they above or below where we might envision them to be based on their development. So is a child at the bottom of a checklist item, or are they at the top and they've already mastered whatever we're looking at in particular? So it could be related to the play checklist. We might be looking at other forms of observation checklists. So we might be specifically looking at an area of development. So is a child able to complete certain physical development tasks? Maybe I'm looking at fine motor or gross motor development. We could also think back to the play checklist and the case study that we were reviewing from our text with Willie, and how on certain checklist items he was in the middle, and then there were some areas that he was lower at, such as when we looked at one item where it stated he would ask for turns, but he did not wait for a response from peers. So then we can kind of move on to the next question and see, okay, are there areas that children are missing, certain play components that are missing from a child's play? So we've already kind of determined, now that we've looked at the play checklist, that the maturest form of play is not being met. And so naturally that will lead us to our next question of, are children missing certain kinds of play components? So for Willie, is it that when he asks for a turn and does not wait for a response, is he lacking play components of verbal communication or problem solving skills? Other things we might look at are persistence. So in verbal communication, we could see that children might have a language delay, or there are cultural differences and they're not able to communicate effectively with each other because they don't speak the same language. Or it could be related to children's personalities and their temperament. Maybe they're more shy around other children their age and they're more comfortable communicating with an adult instead and need an adult to help interpret for them what they're trying to say. A child or children, they might be missing certain play components related to persistence. So a child could potentially be getting bored in what they're playing. The materials or activities are not meeting where they're at developmentally. So that first question we were looking at, so maybe they're engaging in appropriate play for their age, but the materials that we have set out or the activities that we're setting for them are not developmentally appropriate and meet their needs. So do we need to add or take away the challenge in their play? And if a child needs support and is missing play components related to problem solving, are we seeing that they're having aggressive behavior when trying to communicate with others or solve a problem on their own? Are they lacking negotiation skills or language? And when children are missing certain components of play, they might need additional support, and we might need to insert ourselves into children's play to help increase those missing components of play. So we can think about Vygotsky and the zone of proximal development. So what can the child do independently, and what do they need support in? So what area are they missing in their play, and how can I support them to reach that higher skill level? So I've already looked at my play checklist, and I understand that, okay, these are the mature forms of play that a child can meet, and then here are some areas that they might be missing, and what are the specific areas I know that maybe it's problem solving. And so maybe I have a younger child who needs an adult support in being able to communicate their needs when somebody takes their toy. And so I might provide them with key words that they can use, such as mine or stop. And your text also describes how for our younger friends, or just in general, being able to use sign language as a form of modeling and communication. So showing them how to say stop with our hands, as well as vocalizing the word stop and modeling how to solve that problem. Or maybe I have my friend who is missing some play components related to persistence. So that friend who's getting bored or doesn't seem as interested in the play, or they are leaving play sooner than we anticipated. So I might need to add something to their play to hold their attention more. So maybe I am adding in a suggestion to their play scenario, or I'm bringing out new materials to prompt the child to be able to engage them longer. So we might have friends who are washing baby dolls, or they're washing cars, and they start to play with the activity, and then over time I'm noticing there's a decrease in their amount of time spent during that activity. And so maybe I added new materials and suggest to them, oh, when we're all done washing the babies and the cars, why don't we dry them? And so I've brought out towels now, and I've prompted a new step in their play, and now I can see that their persistence has increased. Or I might set up a new dramatic play scene for children once they've mastered what they're already doing. So they've already mastered how to set up the table and to serve food and to feed the baby dolls. And so maybe I switch up my housekeeping and kitchen area, and I think about how I can create new roles for them. So maybe we're setting up a camping area, or a veterinarian or bakery area. So I'm creating a new dramatic play scene where new roles are involved and higher communication skills can be completed and longer play times are happening. So I'm helping children in their persistence. And then the next question that we want to think about is, what kind of interventions should be designed? So this is when we're thinking about those goals that we're going to set for children. And in the next slide, we're going to get into more of the goals in detail. But kind of just thinking about, okay, now that I understand where children are at developmentally, I have an understanding of the mature play forms that they can engage in regularly on their own, and I see where children are missing certain play components. Now I can think about what types of interventions are going to be designed. So that stuff I was talking about related to modeling for problem solving and our persistence, implementing new materials, those might be some things that I do, and my interventions that I'm designing. So I've already thought about my goal. I've gathered my information about the child. So we really want to start with, before we even design our plan of intervention, is getting all our information. So all those observations, and then assessing my observations, assessing the child in more detail. And I might need to do this not only during play, but daily interactions, see how they interact with peers versus teachers, outside time versus inside time. So we talked about all that last week on how to effectively observe. And then we figure out what our role is in supporting the child during their play. So how involved are you going to be? Am I going to have a level of participation that is higher and I'm more inside the play scene, such as a play leader? Or am I more on the outside and I'm setting up the materials for them as the stage manager? So thinking about not only what goals we want to set, but what my role in the intervention is going to be. So now we're going to be talking about goals for children. Okay, so goals. Now we're going to dive more into the goals we want to set for children. So we've already figured out how to appropriately assess children, observe them, and interpret observations based on questions that we're going to use. And when we're thinking about goals, let's start with the planning process of the goals. So remember, before you write a goal, you need to observe and assess, which we already discussed, and then you can start the planning process. And the main reason that we want to create goals for children is to support them. We want them to be able to increase or build upon skills that they are lacking or already have. So focusing on that question of, are children missing certain kinds of play components? So what are they missing out on? Is it that they need more support in physical development skills, problem solving? So really thinking about what skills do we want to help children increase? And this means we might have to come back and review and reflect on the goals after we've set out and implemented them and see if this process has been completed or if we might need to revise our goals and establish a new starting ground, because sometimes we have a goal in mind for a child and we're using it based on their zone of proximal development, but then we go to implement our goal and we realize, oh, this is a little bit too challenging for the child, or it's a little bit too easy. And so I'm going to have to figure out, okay, now how do I support them? Now that I've gone through the planning process, I've tried it out, I might have to revisit it again. So let's think about goals with this lens of goals are broad. So they're overarching statements about what children should develop or learn. So this is my big idea first. So what's my big picture? What do I want children to be able to accomplish through my goals? Is it problem solving skills? Do I want them to work on regulating their big emotions? Is it that I want them to work on their persistence or their verbal communication? So there's many different things that we might want children to work on. And that's our big, broad goal, that overarching statement of what we want children to develop or learn. And we can think about goals, like your text described them, as SMART goals. And you might have heard of SMART goals before. It's not just used when talking about children and how we want to set out goals for them. It's used in many different professional settings, educational settings, and just in your personal life, you might use SMART goals. So just to remind you what SMART goals stand for, so specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So our specific, who is this goal for and why? So who is the child and why are we doing this? So thinking about that big idea first. Why are we setting out that goal? Again, is that problem solving or regulating big emotions? Why? And then we think, okay, what is the measurable aspect of my goal? How much am I expecting the child to be able to do this? And how well do I expect them to do this? And then attainable and realistic are really just focused on, can this goal be accomplished by this child? So again, thinking about their zone of proximal development, how much or how little am I going to put this goal for them? Is it challenging or is it something that's too easy for them? So really thinking about, can this goal be accomplished by the child? Am I really paying attention to their zone of proximal development? And how much am I going to need to support them in completing this goal? And then our timely aspect. So when do you want the goal to be accomplished by? Is it, in a short time frame or throughout the entire year? Again, these are things that you're going to have to think about, and each goal is going to be different. And you might have multiple goals that you want a child to work on, and all the different aspects within each goal are going to look different too. And goals can be for the whole class or for individual children. So depending on the goals that you might have, we can also see some overlap too, because sometimes we might be working with a whole class or individual child on skills, and our big picture might be the same. So we might want everybody to work on problem solving skills, but I have specific things that I want to work on with the whole class. And then with my individual child, there might be some more fine tuning with that problem solving, and they might need a little bit more assistance, or I want to work on specifically decision making and problem solving with my one friend versus in general just building skills on how to problem solve or effective problem solving tools that children might use. So let's think about the whole class for a moment. So maybe I want my whole class to work on the amount of pressure that they need for giving hugs in the classroom versus rough and tumble play. And we kind of can think back to that video that we watched a few weeks ago, and the adult was setting out time beforehand with our whole group who was engaging in rough and tumble play, and we walked through the steps and the rules and recognizing how to be aware of our bodies and the rules and understanding social cues of others. So that might be something that we want to work on with the whole class. And another one could be that we want all of our class to work on throwing paper towels away into the trash can after we do hand washing. So we've noticed that during the routines, our teachers might be helping out a bit more, or children are not throwing paper towels in the trash can, and we'd like to work on this with the whole class. And in conjunction with that, it could also be that the entire cleanup routine of the day we want to work on. So helping children learn how to stop playing and put away toys in corresponding areas. And then let's think about an individual friend. So maybe for our individual friend, we want them to work on how to ask peers for a turn without taking the toy first. Or we want them to work on not kicking over a tower while others are building in the block area. And finally, we might want to see another friend find an activity when the art table's full, or when an activity area is full, being able to walk away and find something else to do. So these might just be some examples of goals that we set out for the whole class versus individual children. And then on the next slides, we're going to be focusing on objectives, and we'll also touch on different strategies to address our goals and objectives. Okay, so now let's talk about objectives. We've already gotten an understanding of what a goal is. So remember, our goals are the big overarching statements of what we want children to be able to develop or learn. So what's the skill that we're going to help them increase and build upon? And our objectives, those are going to be our specific statements that outline exactly what we want children to learn related to our particular goal. And objectives include a few different things. So they include the behavior or skill that we want children to exhibit, and then the criterion for performance or success. And so first we're going to focus on the behavior or skill that we want children to exhibit. So let's think back to our examples with our whole group and our individual children. So we're going to focus on our example of throwing paper towels away in the trash can after washing hands for our whole group. And our objectives for that goal, so our big overarching goal is maybe that we want children to work on establishing a routine, okay? And so then specifically, I know that I want children to throw paper towels away. And some specific statements for my objectives might be, I want children to be more independent and self-sufficient. I want children to practice their fine motor skills and their gross motor skills. So their fine motor skills might be that I want them to practice drying their hands and then crumpling the paper towel. And then I want them to practice their gross motor skills in being able to throw the paper towel or toss it into the trash can. So maybe we practice overhand and underhand and give them different ways to throw their paper towels away. And I also want them to be able to get in the habit of learning the routine, so a step-by-step process. So this might be some of the examples of objectives that I want for my main goal for my whole group. And then let's think about our friend for individual, of their goal of we want them to find another activity when the art table is full. So maybe my main goal for them is that I want them to learn to regulate their big emotions, because I've noticed that every time that an activity, whether it's the art table or the sensory table or maybe the block area, when an area in the classroom is full, our friend has a hard time being able to express how they're feeling. They start to get frustrated. They may go over and knock materials over, try and push friends' bodies to find a seat at whatever area is full. So I want to help my friend regulate their big emotions. And so I want them, with my objectives, to be able to express their emotions. So maybe I want them to be able to label specific ways that they might be feeling in that moment. So giving them the tools to say, I'm mad, or I want them to be able to ask a teacher for help, or be aware of their surroundings and be able to scan the room and find another area that's available. Or if they're not ready to go to another area, I might want them to find the cozy area or the hidey hole that they can go and decompress a little bit. And I might also want them to work on their decision-making skills and problem solving and being able to, okay, my problem is that the art table is full, and here are the steps that I'm going to take in solving the problem. So these might just be some examples of specific statements that I want children to be able to learn related to their big goals. And then the next part of our objectives is the criterion for performance or success. So this is how often or how frequent you want a child to be able to do something. So we're thinking back to our SMART goals, and specifically our M, our measurable SMART goals, right? So our measurable SMART goals are how often or how frequent we want children or a child to be able to do something. So how much am I expecting the child to do this? And also how well. How well do I want them to be able to complete this goal? So let's look at our whole group. So we want them to be able to throw paper towels in the trash can after hand washing. And there's multiple times a day that we might need to throw paper towels away after hand washing. So maybe how frequently I want them to do this is just at least once a day during a hand washing routine. So maybe it's after a meal or after using the restroom. I want to have them practice throwing their paper towel away. And then for my individual friend, where I want them to find another activity, maybe it's once a week during free play. We're going to work on this once a week during free play, having them find another area to go play in. And you can also reflect on other aspects of your SMART goals, because your measurable area may need to be revised, and same with the other areas in your SMART goals, because maybe I'm noticing that it is too challenging for my friend to be able to attain throwing the paper towel away every single day, and I might need to just try once a week for them. Or for my individual friend, I'm noticing, okay, they're able to complete this once a week, so maybe we can bump it up to twice a week, or maybe twice in one day. We have 2 opportunities for free play, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So just kind of thinking about if the child is not able to successfully perform, or they're exceeding our expectations with how frequently they can complete it or how well, then I'm going to adjust that frame of reference for them. And then in the next slides, we're going to be talking about strategies to address our goals and objectives. Okay, so let's think about developing strategies to address goals and objectives. So again, more questions for you to think about. Like I mentioned at the beginning of our lecture, evaluating play really comes down to the questions that we ask ourselves. And we need to think about, how am I going to effectively develop strategies to address my goals and objectives? And a large part of evaluating children's play is in our ability to reflect and ask ourselves questions. And the more questions that we are able to ask ourselves, the more likely we're able to meet children's needs to the best of our abilities and tune in and pay attention to the finer details from our observations and our assessments, and look at children's perspectives more in detail. And overall, we're able to better think about how to create the most meaningful integration of skill building for the child or children that we need to support during their play. So let's think about the following question. So when will you work on the goal? And this is a big one. You have to be able to dedicate enough time to plan and effectively come up with something that is meaningful for a child, because we might have so many skills that we want to work on with an individual child or whole group, but if we don't take time on our own part to develop a goal that is well-rounded and truly focuses on not only the bigger picture, but specific objectives of what we want children to be able to do, and also think about how involved we're going to be and how much time we can spend working with this child on the goal, then it's not going to go as planned. And we have to put in more thought, more time, and more planning to be more successful. And also, the more knowledge that we have on the child, so taking time to understand their development, tuning into their cultural and home life backgrounds, as well as taking additional time to observe them in more than just one sitting of play, it's going to help us to be better prepared to support them. Because maybe I noticed that after my observation time, that the best time to implement my plans with my goal is during free play time, or it needs to be one-on-one with the child. So truly thinking about, when will we work on the goal, and when am I going to find time to work on the goal with the child? And overall, just having a better understanding of when we're unprepared and we have poor planning, it can lead to ineffective ways of how we implement our goal. And next, we want to think about, what are the child's special interests? And this is a big one. If we're not tuning into what children are interested in, we're lacking a key component in being able to effectively implement our goals. So we don't just want to look at children's development, their current skills and areas that they're challenged in, as well as their cultural background. Those are super important areas. But if we're not focusing on children's interests, we might be missing key opportunities to be able to help them with skill building. So thinking about ways that we can be more useful to the child's learning comes when we look at their special interests. So your direct and your indirect guidance can be reflected through your thoughtfulness in your planning if you're looking at what children are interested in. So let's think about a child who might love animals, and maybe our big goal that we want to work on with this child is their persistence. We notice that they're not as involved in play, and we find that they are kind of roaming around the classroom. They might come over and interrupt other children while they're playing, and they don't seem interested in what we have set out. And we think, okay, well, we've taken time to observe them, and we notice that they're not as persistent, but we notice that they love animals, and they talk about animals a lot, and we've heard from family that they like to go to the zoo or the aquarium. And so maybe we suggest new play scenarios for them, and we set up the play environment with new materials. And so we're using our direct and our indirect guidance, and maybe I'm inserting myself more into the play scene, so my role is more involved in the play during that initial setup of the play scenario. So I maybe bring out stuffed animals into my dramatic play area, and I help the child build a zoo setting in the block area. So I'm creating new play scenes that are relevant to the child's special interests. And then I'm able to observe, after I've set up this scenario for them, or whatever the special interest is to the child, and I notice, oh wow, we're able to work on this goal because I'm focused on their special interests, and it made it more meaningful for the child. It's not just some random goal that's going to be a task for them. It's something that they have to do. It's something that naturally is implemented into their play because they're already interested in what we're working on. And then we also want to think about how many children will be involved. So again, thinking back to our whole group or individual, and also tuning into our environment setup. And is it going to meet the number of children that I have? So if I'm going to want to work with a whole group, do I have enough activity spots set up, or am I going to need to do my implementing outside to make more room for everybody? What time of day is it going to be? So how many children are going to be involved? And does this skill building also require one-on-one time with a teacher? Because sometimes when we want to work on a goal with a child, we might need to readdress our role in the child's play and realize that our time needs to be spent more one-on-one with the child. So thinking about how many children will be involved, and then thinking about where will it take place. So as I mentioned earlier, you might need to be doing your planning and implementing your plan for outside, and think back to the skills that you're trying to help children to gain and build upon. So if I want children to work on their gross motor skills, am I going to need to move around the furniture in the classroom, or would it be better set for outside? Maybe we think back to our individual friend who we wanted to work on not kicking over the blocks while others are building. And they just seem to want to, every time someone's building a tall tower, go and kick it over. So would I want to help them work on this skill in the block area, or would I want to help them at the water table? Most likely I'm going to want to go to the source. the block area. And I might think about what time of day I want to work on this skill with the child. Is it one-on-one with them? So I build a tower and I show them how to use the blocks, or is it during free play time and I sit with all the children and help to insert them into the play with others? So maybe what they really need to work on is being able to insert themselves into the play scene, and they're having a hard time communicating their needs that they want to play with other children. And once I sit there in the block area where the behavior that I want to support a child in is taking place, and that missing piece of their play component, I realize, oh, okay, I actually need to help them work on inserting themselves and being more cooperative in the play. They want to share their ideas, and maybe they're interested in being a construction truck, and so I bring in different props. So moving on to that last question. So we think about, okay, what if they're really interested in knocking things over and they want to be a construction worker and they're tearing buildings down? But I didn't realize that until I paid attention to what the child might be saying or how they were trying to insert themselves in the play scene, and I saw it as disruptive, and I took more time to set myself in that play scene, and then maybe I thought about what props will be needed. So I brought in props to prompt the child's interest. So maybe I brought in some construction trucks or construction tools. And so then other children were interested in the construction aspect of it. And so we learned what happens when an excavator comes by and knocks down the buildings, and how to build a building and tear it down. And so then I created a whole new play scene and allowed children to be more cooperative, and also helped this child to insert themselves in the play scene. Or I think about practicing safe kicking skills if the child really isn't insistent on using their legs. So maybe I show them how to kick soft blocks inside and where to go to do that. Or I show them outside where we can kick using the balls, or I bring some blocks outside for them and show them how to properly use the material. So a variety of different ways that I might think about what props are needed, where my setting will take place, as well as what children's special interests are. So these are just some of the questions we might think about when developing strategies for addressing goals and objectives. And then we're going to talk briefly about the planning form. Okay, so last but not least, we're going to briefly touch on the planning form and how to use it. And this form will be needed for your child observation report coming up towards the mid to end semester, and the link for the planning form is located here, and it's also in chapter 9 of your text if you need more information about it. And the planning form covers the content that we discussed today related to planning a goal, the specific details of how you're going to implement your goal, and finally a reflective piece to consider after you've completed your implementation of your goal, and thoughtful questions that you're going to want to ask yourself. And I've decided to create a separate assignment guidelines video, as I've already mentioned, but I'm going to wait until after your exam. And the reason for this is because your main focus this week, I want to be on the exam, and then in the week following, I will make an assignment guidelines video where I will be going over the child observation report and how to use not only this planning form, but also the play checklist that we discussed last week. So no need to worry about it for right now. It's here for you to take a peek at, but we'll get into more detail about it in the coming weeks. And really, your main focus this week should be on taking your exam, as well as getting your discussion post 3 in. And of course, I will be sending out an announcement with reminders on everything that you need to complete this week to stay on track. And that is all I have for you for today's lecture. So I hope you enjoyed evaluating play, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye, everyone.